Deepak, I, like you, have been obsessed with consciousness my whole life, and I began with a doctorate in neuroscience thinking that would help me, and it didn't. And what I realize is that everybody has different definitions of consciousness. What's yours?
First of all, I'd like to tell you, Robert, that if you want to understand consciousness, then the last thing you want to be is a neuroscientist. Okay, because it doesn't give you a clue. Of course, consciousness is defined in so many ways, and I could give you a number of definitions, but I think the simplest would be, it is what makes experience possible. It is what makes perception possible. It is what makes thinking possible. So everything that we call reality, whether it's perception, cognition, thinking, personal relationships, social interactions, biology, interaction with nature, it's the ultimate reality. So in the Vedanta, which I'm a student of, consciousness cannot be seen, but makes seeing possible. It cannot be heard, but makes hearing possible. Cannot be tasted or smelled, but makes tasting and smelling possible. It cannot be touched, but it makes touching possible. It's the ground of experience. It's not perception, okay? It's the awareness in which perception happens, because perception may be different for different cultures, for different species. The perception that I have of you would not be the perception an insect with 100 eyes would have of you, or a bat who navigates through the echo of ultrasound, or a chameleon whose eyeballs swivel on two different axes. I don't even remotely know what the experience of Robert would be like to a chameleon. But the awareness of consciousness is the common ground. Just like the common ground of the little gizmo, these contraptions that I'm wearing, my watch, my iPhone, the television set, the people who are watching us on the program, people who hear us on the radio, people who navigate the internet. The common ground there is the electromagnetic field. Mm-hmm. The common ground for every possible experience in the universe is awareness, consciousness. Now, perceptions, cognitions, experiences are almost infinite.
So what you're saying is that the cognition, perceptions, all of these things are reflections of consciousness, or are enabled by consciousness. Consciousness is a force. How do you distinguish between the things that consciousness enables, which you describe, and consciousness itself?
Consciousness is the common ground of all these different experiences. It is prior to subject-object split, because now I'm the subject of experience. Of course, you're the object of my experience. Right. I'm the object of your experience. Right. When I look at the world, I see a tree, I see a star, I see a galaxy. Those are the objects of my experience. But of course, there must be something that's more fundamental to subject and object of experience. So, science, as we practice it, is a subject-object split exercise.
Sure, third person.
Yeah, and also not only that, the scientist is an observer. Never mind that we cannot find this observer. The observing self cannot be located by science. Right. Okay, but consciousness, the scientist is the observer, but of course the scientist's consciousness is the observer, and the universe is the observed. That already leads, by the way, to an incomplete view of reality. Right there, because you excluded one huge component of the observation process, the observing self. So now there's a universe somehow outside of you, and that's the true universe. How could it be? Because you excluded half the element of the experience, right? So I don't think consciousness is the observing self either. Okay, consciousness is prior to the split between object and subject, because there are multiple observers, multiple modes of observation, and multiple objects of observation. The common ground of that is prior to subject-object split, prior to experience, but the ground of experience.
The fundamental aspect of consciousness is this inner feeling of experiencing something, knowing what it's like to see your very colorful shirt. I mean, that makes an impression on me.
That's perception.
I know what that is.
But this color would mean nothing to an observing self that did not have the apparatus.
Of course. Those colors are not in the real world. That's how I perceive it. Correct. Of course, yes. Of course. How pervasive is consciousness, as you've defined it? The entire animal kingdom? How far do you go down, and how pervasive does it go?
If it is prior to subject-object split, as I have mentioned, it's infinite, it's unbounded, it's eternal, it is timeless.
Some would claim that if you define consciousness so grandly, you really destroy any possibility of truly understanding it. And you make it so mystical that you can say anything you want.
So I must then defend mysticism, because mysticism...
You're not embarrassed to be called a mystic, then?
Oh, no. I think the essential experience of truth is only through mysticism. Truth cannot be a system of thought. No system of thought can give you knowledge of truth. Why? Because a system of thought is a map. Science is a system of thought based on observation, experimentation, validation, peer review also. But it has certain rules. It's a system of thought. Yes. Philosophy is a system of thought. Okay, epistemology, ontology, etc. Religion is a system of thought. Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, etc., Hinduism. They're all systems of thoughts. In other words, they're ideologies. Therefore, they are dogmatic in their insistence on the validity of their map, which they mistake for the territory. And thirdly, they have some commonalities, but they're always at odds. For sure. The mystics within religion are the rebels. They say no system of thought can give me the truth, because a system of thought is a map. Okay, so what's the common thing between the Sufis and the Christian mystics? And, almost all of them kind of relegated to the outskirts or the fringes of their religion, because they're not accepted, is they realized that in order to know fundamental truth, to understand fundamental reality, you cannot depend on perception, and you cannot depend on cognition or a system of thought or a map. You have to actually transcend to an experience where there is nothing.
Scientists would say that I agree with everything that you've said, except you cannot classify the scientific method as part of these ideologies, because the scientific method is not a system of thought as much as it's a process to access truth. And it's the only one that you can be sure of because of the process. The other systems, we have no way to validate them. Somebody says this, somebody says that, a mystic says this. Yeah, maybe they feel that, but I have no way of independently confirming it. The scientific method, which you articulated very well, is the only way that you can know, that you and I can both know that truth, as opposed to the mystic who, I believe that you feel that way, but I can't feel it. Scientific method is the only way that you and I together can believe in an independent reality.
I have several problems with that. Science is not a method for knowing the truth. Science is a method for knowing partial truth. If we knew the truth, we wouldn't be making atomic bombs, and we wouldn't be proliferating biological weapons of mass destruction. We wouldn't have created mechanized death. We wouldn't have caused climate change. We wouldn't be messing up the ecosystem with GMO foods or petroleum products in what we put inside our body. We call them insecticides. They're supposed to kill insects. We share the same DNA. Why wouldn't they kill us? So science, as we practice it today, is a map for partial truth. It looks at the universe as an activity that is independent of me. But me, the observer, is also an activity of the universe. Okay, so when I go inward, I'm going to an activity of the universe as much as I go outward. So I watched recently some little documentary on Lawrence Krauss. He said, why do we have to believe people who went inward thousands of years ago in the Iron Age? We have all these instruments to look outward. Well, he's forgetting that what is happening inside is also an activity of the same star stuff that makes the galaxies and the universe. And by going inward, I can also access the truth. In fact, if I transcend the subject-object split, I may get at the closer, as you would say, closer to the truth. Because then I see that I'm not separate. Okay, I'm an activity of that which I observe. And this is what science doesn't recognize. Also, there are limitations to science. Okay, limitations, epistemological limitations. We depend on a nervous system that has evolved over 13.8 billion years. Why do we suppose it's not going to keep evolving? Okay, a monkey doesn't have the same access to the truth as you and I have. So that's a bit of arrogance that I know it's a totally anthropomorphic, not even anthropic view. It's an anthropomorphic view that I am this privileged species in the universe that has a nervous system that can access the truth. How do you know what's going to happen 1,000 years from now, provided we don't cause mass extinction of our species and all other species through the technologies developed by science? So I find it totally ridiculous when somebody says that science is a map of the truth. You know, what happened at the Planck scale? What happened in Planck time? Do we even know? There were no constants. The laws of physics break down. Okay. Why did the Big Bang occur when it occurred? And what do we mean by when there was no time? How can you have a datable event in time when time doesn't exist? And yet everybody buys into the Big Bang theory, okay? Because if you're not buying into it, if you don't buy into classic modern neo-Darwinist interpretations of evolution, if you don't buy into the Big Bang as explained currently by science, you are subject to ridicule. You are stupid. You do not understand how science works. Explain to me, how do you have a datable event in time when there was no time? Tell me the location of the Big Bang, not only in time, but in space, because space didn't exist. I asked one of the authors of the double dark theory of the universe. I said, where did the Big Bang occur? He said, everywhere. I said, everywhere. Oh, omnipresence. I said, and now we have how much energy? He said, almost limitless. I said, oh, omnipotence. He said, and I said, where did it come from? He said, nothing. I said, omniscience. Sure. You know, you guys have created your own mythology, and we buy into it without even questioning your mythology. We don't understand, you know, so you are willing to propose 10 to the power of 500 universes. You know, even a computer would take eternity to count them because you can't actually explain what's happening. And then you finally ask, where does science happen? You know, the activity that we call science, where are scientific theories conceived? In consciousness. Where are experiments designed? In consciousness. Where are observations made? In consciousness. What is empirical evidence? It's a species-specific mode of observation. It has nothing to do with fundamental truth. You know, I have done science in my life, and I'm amazed how we create truth and then buy into it and call it truth when it's an ideology. You know, I observe a moving biology. Your biology is not a constant. It's a moving thing, okay? I observe it, I freeze it, I kill it. I then identify something that I call a molecule, which actually doesn't exist because it's a movement, or it's a flow. Now I call it, I give it a name, okay? Oxytocin. Then we all agree, now it's reality. It doesn't exist. You know, what you observe, it really doesn't exist. Only the observer actually is giving it a label. That's all. And what is empirical evidence? It's a species-specific mode of observation that we agree on.